Now that the upper torso is done, you can see it's nicely tightly wrapped all the way around. I'm going to start putting some glue onto the spine area of the upper half. And then I'm going to put some glue on the lower half. And I'm going to wait a minute to start wrapping. We have to make sure we place it correctly using your drawing as a reference so that the character stays within the confines of the drawing. So before it gets glued together, you have to line everything up to make sure that he's not too tall or not too short, because that's very important. So I still need to wait a moment and then we'll wrap. So it's been the full minute, and I'm going to line it up so it's centered on the character's shoulder, so there's room to kind of fill the character out. And I'm going to make sure that the legs are long enough too, and then I'm just going to stick the spine together with just the bit of glue that we have on there. And I've pre-cut some wire, or not some wire, I've pre-cut some thread. I often say wire because sometimes I use wire to do this, but thread's going to be the cheap and quick way to do this. So I hook a little bit on there and then I start winding it up. It takes a little bit of finagling because now you have the arms in the way, but it will come together. And again, do it loosely to start with, and then you can go in and refine the lashing to make it nice and tight. And then take a look at it, double check with your drawing, and make sure that everything lines up nicely before you do any tight wrapping. Okay, so there you hold it together and you give it a couple of good winds, and then you do the same thing all the way up the spine. The next step for the armature is going to be to add just a tiny bit of JB Quick right to the spine. It doesn't need to be much, but it will help solidify and basically make the entire armature monolithic. So all these separate wires are lashed together with the glue. For me, the one part that's a little bit shaky sometimes is this core piece right here. So just to be safe, because it's going to be all inside your puppet, I mix some JB Quick. It's a 2-part epoxy, so you want to take a little bit of side A and what I lovingly call a schmear into a little mixing dish or a piece of cardboard if you have it, and then a little bit of the other. This stuff has a little bit of a weird smell to it, but it'll be fine. So you can see that it is two different colors. So take your stirring stick and mix it really well. Just kind of spin it around there until it becomes one dark gray color. Scrape the stick off. You don't want any uncured or unmixed epoxy. So get it kind of slathered onto your stick like so. And then go right to the center of the spine and smear it in. You don't want to make it very big, because what this does is it locks down the armature. It makes it immobile. It doesn't allow it to move. So if you put too much on there, it'll restrict the movement of your puppet. So you have to be very careful. So this is really just an extra precaution that I add. So you let that set up, and then we will make the neck, attach that. We have our thinner wire that we're going to be using for our neck. Now the neck will have to start about in the middle of the spine and go up and out beyond the head. The head in our drawing is only this large, but I'm going to make the wire much longer. It's always easier to trim down a wire that's too long than to have to lengthen it. We're going to use the wire that comes out the top to attach the head, so we might need to shorten it because of the neck, lengthen it because of the neck or fold it over to glue it in. So let's be generous. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure from the middle of the spine to just about there. And this is thinner wire. This is similar to the backup wire that we used. And we're going to fold this over until it makes 4 wires. Now this also, again, will depend on your character. Do you have a character with a large head, a heavy head? Does it have a tiny head? That will depend on, that will decide what kind of wire to use. That's kind of the same with the whole puppet. Okay, so I have this wrapped in over and over so that it makes 4 layers. I'm going to trim this, get rid of the extra. And I never twist it, always keep it parallel. So now to prepare this wire, I am going to brush on some glue like we've done for the other parts of the armature. So give it a nice liberal coating. Don't put it on the wire that's not going to be in the body because that's going to be used to attach the head, and we don't want any flexible glue on there because we'll probably be using epoxy putty to attach the head. So make sure that it all lines up. Let's brush where it's going to be lashed to. And then we're going to wait a minute. It's been a minute. Now we're ready. We've got glue on both sides. I've kind of pre-cut some thread. So place that just about halfway down. And just like everything else we've done, let's put a loop through the neck, or over the neck, and give it one wrap just so it has a place to start. You could bend this arm out of the way. I try not to bend my armatures too much while I'm designing them or fabricating them so that it doesn't kind of get worn out before I actually finish the puppet. You can add the epoxy. You can add the neck first before you put the epoxy putty on the armature. That's up to you. I will do it both ways sometimes. Sometimes I'll do it the one way or the other. It depends. I probably would have waited to do the epoxy putty after this. Or I should say that JB Quick. Okay, so that's the initial wrap. So let's put a second one on. You could bend these wires so they're not so cumbersome and in the way by folding it over. And then it's important to wrap it up there at the top because that's the exiting point. And keep wrapping. Okay, it's been some time and this is now set up. It's rock hard and it's created this nice bond. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the feet. So you'll remember in the beginning of the tutorial we had these loops at the bottom of the feet or at the bottom of the legs. Now these represent the toes. So imagine that that's the toe of the puppet. So what we're going to do eventually is we're going to bend this up at a right angle. It's going to become the feet where the character gets tied down to your animation table. What I'm going to try now, which is new, is not bending this yet, but applying or attaching these. These are called T-nuts. Oops, sorry, I'll put them in the light. These are called T-nuts. And T-nuts can be found at hardware stores. They're usually used in woodworking. They're a flat metal screw, or not screw, but nut that has a threaded rod in the center, and these little spikes that are sticking up. These are going to become the hardware that the tie down goes into from below the table into the foot. So instead of bending this foot and making it kind of hard to deal with, we're just going to keep it flat. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the T-nut right into the loop of where the toe is. So you see that? You see how that kind of lines up with the bottom of the wire? So this hole is a little bit larger and it kind of sits in there but falls out. But, and you'll see how it falls. This one sticks. You can squish this a little bit and get it to stick, but you don't really need to. What we're going to do is we're going to lay it right here. Now, this we're going to use epoxy putty once again. But this epoxy putty, when we add this, we're going to have to be a little bit more careful. So I'm going to cut a little piece of wire to use as a tool, or if you have a sculpting tool, that'll work, to apply your epoxy putty. Because you don't want the epoxy putty, the JB Quick to go above the ankle. So imagine that this right here is the ankle, and you don't want to go above that. You just want it to encompass around this piece of hardware so it bonds to the wire. So here's, you can see I've pre-squished out 2 smears of JB Quick. I'm going to reuse this stick to mix it. And again, do it vigorously and make sure that you don't leave any unmixed pieces. If you see streaks, then it's not mixed thoroughly and it won't set up. It's a chemical reaction, so both sides have to be set up. I'm just going to wipe this off here so I can even use it a third time. Save the planet. Okay, so I'm going to take my T-nut like so, and I'm going to carefully take some JB Quick and I'm going to put it around the perimeter of the flat on the inside, on the bottom of the, or the top of the flange. And this is just to make sure that I get glue underneath the wire and on top of the wire. You have to be super careful not to get anything in the hole, because that would then make it impossible to use the threaded hole as a tie down. So you have to be very careful. I usually use a sculpting tool, but I thought, why not, in case people don't have a sculpting tool, they might use a piece of wire. You could use a toothpick, but you can kind of see that it's around there. Now, this is a 2-step process. You really just want to make sure that these attach to the wire. So now that it's got glue on it, JB Quick, you can just attach it like so. All right, and if you have a tool to push down, you can use a tool near the toe. Just don't do it anywhere near the ankle, because any scratches with a tool like this could become a break when you're trying to animate this puppet down the road. So now that it's in place there, you can see our original drawing is getting a little bit messy. You still have a little bit of time because this still has a fairly good working time. You want to brush some of this or smear some of this on so that it goes over and under the hardware that becomes the foot. I'm going to show you a close-up in a moment. I just want to kind of do it. As this stuff gets thicker, it starts to get a little bit harder to work with. But don't worry about it, because you can do this in layers. You can see right there that it's going under and over the wire, but it's not going into that hole or below this surface. You can see this surface is clean. This surface has it on there. For me, what I'm going to probably do is let this set up, because this stuff is getting thick, and I'm going to make sure that the wire is completely covered so it makes a good bond to this metal then to the wire, so that when I bend this up, it becomes the flat of that foot. It's got a really good bond to it. Now that the JB Quick is fully cured, you can see here on the feet that I added a couple of layers on there to build it up to make sure that the wire and the T-nuts are completely encompassed, but not going anywhere near here, because now that it's cured, I can bend this up and this becomes the foot. This becomes basically the toe of the foot. Now you can add a decorative piece on there to make it look more like a shoe or some feet or hooves, whatever you want. But by bending that up, now the puppet can be locked onto the stage and walk. And you can see the JB Quick is also cured here. So now when I go to move this armature, it doesn't swivel or move around. It's all locked into place. So this is the basic armature before we move on to the hands, which will be the next part. And just to let you know, JB Quick, it's got about 4 minutes to work. You can work on it for about 4 minutes, and then it totally cures in 4 hours. But within a half hour, you can start to pick the armature up and work on other things, as long as you don't try to tie it down. But this is fully cured, nice and hard.